I say, hey, welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm really happy to have George Ferguson with me. George is a good friend, and he is industry analyst up at Bloomberg. So I read his information every day and love it, and it's some good content. And happy to have him on, just talk about aerospace and aviation and the world around us. So, hey, thanks for coming on, George.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate you having me. It's excited to be able to sit here and talk the industry with you.
It's all good. Industry's it's certainly an interesting time right now.
Yes,
for sure.
The last bunch of years have been unprecedented. I think is the word that best describes what's going on in our business. And I just think about sort of Boeing and how it got here. And you think about the grounding of an airplane of a new airplane with the crashes. Then we stepped into a pandemic where air traffic went to zero. And now we're on the other side of that, trying to figure out how the heck to ramp up production as quick as possible at both Boeing and Airbus, and the challenges that they're facing. And so, I feel like there's definitely like a pretty strong changing of the guard inside the business right now, the manufacturing business. I feel like there's, a heavy amount of talent. A lot of it, I think, is stocked up in baby boomers that they're getting ready to do the next thing they want to do in life. The pandemic and was probably a good excuse to rethink where they wanted to be and what they wanted to do. And they left. And I think that the talent drain has been really hard in the industry. And I just think, like, when I think back to me growing up, much to my dad's chagrin, right? I would tell him all the time I wanted to be an airline pilot. So I didn't make it. But that a pilot was somebody that I envisioned very high and on my status meter. And aerospace, the space shuttle and aviation was really important to me. I thought it was the best industry to be involved in. And that's why I do what I do. But I think we haven't seen that in the next generation, right? We have not. We're in a much more tech, computer, kind of generation where the kids haven't thought about coming into aviation, haven't either pilots or working as a mechanic at Boeing or at an airline. So the backfill here, I think, is going to be really hard. And I think, what we're seeing at companies like Boeing is that challenge on the backfill. There was a lot of things, I think, that ran almost on cruise control prior to the pandemic because there were so many people that did what they loved every day, cared a lot about the process, cared a lot about the quality, didn't need a lot of training, grew up during times where there's lots of volume in the industry. Now our commercial volumes are going to records. The defense volumes are off, but like I said, I think as they've left, the backfill's been harder. We have a new generation we got to bring to the industry. We got to train it in the industry, and the tolerances are tight in our industry. And so I thought really interesting that this morning, Brian West was speaking at Bank of America's, their conference in London. Excuse me. They asked him about the coming union contract, and I think I heard a verbal hug in there, right? I think a lot different than the last union contract, right? Partners, they love they love the products. We need them to make it better. And I think that's the next couple decades in aviation because people don't want to come here as much anymore. And now we got to go get them, make them love it, cultivate them, train them. And that's going to mean a different world also, I think, for profitability inside the space.
Yeah. No, I look, we've done a horrible job as an industry of recruiting the next generation. But then again, look, when you're competing against Microsoft and Apple, TikTok, and pick a company, times changed since, you and I were 30 years old. It's like this thing called the internet, it's like when I was getting out of the Navy, the internet was still CompuServe and a dial-up modem.
Yep.
And, the internet came along and that was exciting and offered a lot of opportunity. And, robotics now and some other stuff. So, there's still some challenges. The people side of the house is definitely going to be challenging.
It's going to be super critical, I think. The funny thing too, though, is I have a pilot's license. I mess around. I don't do as much of it as I used to do. I know how to fly Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I fly it, talking about the virtual world. But when you get up in a real airplane and you look around, you're like, oh, the physical world is so much more exciting than, to me, than the virtual version of the world. So, but again, we're going to have to cultivate those folks and bring them in.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I'm not a gamer. My kids aren't gamers, and it's totally different. But lots of interesting things happening. Boeing trying to buy Spirit now. Spirit Airlines coming with $1 billion of the debt. I read something yesterday that Southwest unions are already starting to think about integrating another airline. So maybe there's some M&A on there. But my opinion is the only M&A that's going to happen is if somebody goes bankrupt, you can get the assets. So I don't know, but let's start with the 800-pound gorilla. Boeing and Spirit. Does that deal get done? And is it accretive to Boeing? And does that help to solve Boeing's issues?
Yeah, so I do think the deal gets done. And I think that it doesn't matter if it's accretive. I think that what matters the most to Boeing now is controlling the process from it's not the beginning, right? There are suppliers that supply into Spirit, but they make such a significant portion of the 737. I think there was just no way to avoid getting in there and making sure the way they want things done, things are done that way, right? And so we put a report out a couple of weeks ago, and we borrowed some data from the FAA, where the FAA looked at Boeing. It was back 2 decades ago. They looked at Boeing, and they looked at the suppliers to the Boeing, to Boeing products. And they looked at over a bunch of different decades, back I think to the 60s or something like that. And they just put on some major subsystems, they would put sort of an American flag. It was an American supplier, and they'd put international flags on where the pieces came from. And when you looked at it till the report was written a couple decades ago, the number of flags on that chart have increased dramatically. And the FAA indicated, part of the problem they'd seen is the ability to oversee the manufacturing of airplanes that are being sourced from global suppliers, and with more and more suppliers entering the business. And so Spirit is part of Boeing, I think, starting to fix that problem so they can control it better. I think that their supply chains had gotten a bit too far flung. There are definitely people inside the industry that I think look at the auto business and think, look, the auto business goes out and just outsources lots of these pieces, brings it to the factory floor, and plugs it into the car, right? And so, that's a way for you don't have to have the employees on your company's payroll. You could, those employees and suppliers paid less. You can get two suppliers, play them off against each other, push costs down, and you really become just sort of a system aggregator. I think Boeing tried to go down that road pretty far. I think Airbus went less far down that road, but everybody watched it. But again, I think the challenge we have here is that in aerospace, one, we just don't have the volumes that they have in the car business, right? The good car factory builds 400,000 units a year, and we build nothing near that amount. So there's not always that dual supplier that you can go and play off against each other. And there's not enough volume for everybody to have as good a financial health. And then you've got to really control the process again, because safety and quality are so much more critical in aerospace than they are in the car business. And so I feel like the next couple of years, there's probably going to be a little bit of an unwinding. I think we're already seeing it, right? We're seeing situations where suppliers are breaking down, and the Boeings and the Airbuses and even the engine makers are stepping in, buying some of those broke down suppliers because they need them, they're critical, and putting them inside so that they can stabilize their production. And look, I think definitely one of the stressors was that we went from that post or pre-pandemic. Hey, Airbus was in the 60s build rates for A320s per month, and Boeing was in the 50s. And we crashed through the pandemic, and Airbus is 45-ish now. Boeing's trying to be 38, but less. That put a huge amount of stress on those suppliers. And maybe if the bounce back was faster, the pandemic never occurred, that supplier base would be in more health, but it's not. And now I think there's going to be a little bit of reaggregation. But again, on Spirit, I think the challenge there is it's just so critical to the 737 build. And that's the cash generator. That's the profit generator at Boeing. And I think Calhoun, the CEO, knows if he doesn't get in there and make sure that everything he wants gets done immediately with a straight line for responsibility, he runs the risk of not stabilizing the 737 program. And that would be the end of Boeing.
Yeah. Look, it's certainly not easy to be a build print supplier right now.
No.
Partnership for Success hurt.
Yeah.
GE hurt them.
Yeah.
Your big companies like, where they squeezed and they squeezed and they squeezed. And, I'm talking to all these folks, and they're like, they want 120, 180 day payment terms. So the day of the small guys being the bank, the big guys, then on top of that, you put, high strength steel, titanium, supply chain costs,
materials. Yep.
The small guys can't be the bank for the big guys anymore.
Not at all. And again, you're only as good as your weakest link. So you can push those suppliers, but if they break, you break, unless you've got lots of them, right? So maybe if there's multiple of them, there needs to be some aggregation. But if you break them, you can't build airplanes, and that's not where you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where I think that's where a lot of the breakdown came in, is when Boeing, Partnership for Success, our suppliers are making more margin than we are. Well, that's that's not their problem. That's your problem. Go fix your processes and lean them out too.
That's right.
So that's a tough thing. When does Boeing become investable again? I mean, you've got a lot of people out there. It's, at what point to say, okay, Calhoun, but I think everybody's happy to jump on the bandwagon right now. I think they're probably closer to fixing that which is wrong than not. But at what point does it become, quote unquote, investable again?
Yeah, this one is hard, right? Because I think a lot of us thought we saw the corner being turned at the end of last year, coming into this year, right? And then again, that's why Spirit's so crucial. And then we had these little nagging problems that kept coming out of Spirit. It was the vertical stabilizers not attached correctly, and then the door comes off. So we keep seeing these these false dawns, right? There is a point where you get to, usually on a stock, where the bad news flow is so constant that you almost know you've got to be near a bottom, right? And this one again has been hard, but the bad news flow is pretty constant right now. And so, you can imagine that at some point we're gonna run out of the energy to chase bad news flow all the time, and that's probably that becomes part of the time to really reconsider. I don't think by a long shot, that Boeing is done here, right? I think Boeing will right the ship. I think that they need to for American aerospace. And I think that they're putting in place the bottom, which is focusing again on that manufacturing quality. But right now, I think it's really hard because they won't give you any guidance, right? And so the market's really clamoring for some level of guidance. CFO West didn't give it today. He said there'd be a lot of cash burn in 1Q, $4 to $4.5 billion free cash flow burn. He said by year end, he thought that they would be a positive free cash flow for the year. So if you think about his comments, it tells you that it could be the darkest we think it's been in a while in 1Q.
Mm-hmm.
And by mid-year, we ought to be seeing stabilization, build rates rising, profitability starting to flow through Boeing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's absolutely a positive, on the story. I think though, if you're thinking about a company, and look, you start getting better financial results, that's a large part of where Boeing needs to go. The thing is, if you're looking at a company, you're wondering if it's ever going to be at the level of profitability it was as it was going into the MAX grounding in 2018. I don't know that you get that kind of rebound in the next couple of years, because again, I see a company that's fundamentally has to invest in its people, its supply chain. Like we talked earlier, it can't go out and just squeeze people. It's going to have to leave some margin on the table, improve the health of all of the constituents around the business. And at the same time, I would argue that the book of business they have in the backlog is probably not as lucrative as it was in the last decade. And that's because having gone through the grounding, and then the Chinese wouldn't let the MAX into the country for a while, they went out and sold a bunch of airplanes to big customers like Southwest, United, Ryanair, and they probably sold them at really good prices. And so, we have a company, I think, that's probably going to take till near the end of the decade to get to maybe the profitability they saw in the last decade.
Yeah.
But again, the turnaround is probably much sooner, and that's probably that ought to be mid-year-ish if they stabilize the manufacturing process.
Yeah, look, in Boeing's defense, a lot of big companies have been, dogpiled. Ford, you remember the Ford Explorer debacle, and that was the divorce with Ford and Firestone. And then I think Toyota had their debacle when they were saying runaway, it was like, it was airbag or runaway motors or something like that. And then everybody dogpiled Toyota. Yeah, hey, look, Ford, Toyota, very investable companies.
Yes.
It will turn. But I remember hearing deals a couple of years ago, end of COVID, middle of COVID deals on the MAX, $38 million for a MAX.
Yeah.
Like you can't not make money. You buy a MAX for $38 million. It's really hard not to make money with that airplane. So I'm sure Ryanair is, great article in the Wall Street Journal about Michael O'Leary. Yeah.
Agreed. I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, again, it looks dark, but agreed. But I think the other angle I'd sort of throw in here too is, remember, there's a great global services business. There's a great global services business, high teens margins, right? I think we have it modeled in the quarter, some $800 million in profit out of that business. That keeps things chugging for a while. Now, I'd argue too, that's a tail business, right? That's hey, we sold the airplanes. Now we're helping you modify the airplanes. We're helping you use them in different kinds of, it's going to, maybe you turn it into a freighter or whatever else you need our help. It's a tail business, but it's still a very strong business, nice margins. And that will help support this company. And the defense business has been banged up, but there's a lot of great products inside that defense business. And those great products, it'll take a little time to run off some of these fixed price projects that hurt them. KC-46 tanker, but remember, they're replenishing half the tanker fleet. There's another half of that tanker fleet we got to go out and fix.
Yep.
Boeing will probably get that contract, right? And those tankers will fly for 50 years. And they've got Chinooks inside there, right? Heavy lift helicopters, which, given some of the recent helicopter moves by the Army, probably be in the force for a long time. They've got the Apache, which is a tank killer, the most modern tank killing helicopter. You need more of those. That's a great product. That will keep that defense business humming. So they'll fix the problems with something, like the KC-46 tanker. They'll fix the problems with, Air Force One. That'll sooner or later get pushed out the door, and we'll get past these problems in defense where we're not making a lot of money in defense, and that's another strong portion of this business. Yep. And those will both help stabilize things as commercial continues to come around. So it just it's a great company.
I blame the DoD for as much as I blame any OEM. The DoD, as much as they love to say we're all great leaders, and they can't manage. It can't manage its way on a paper bag. And to think that we got to have a 4-engine airplane for Air Force One. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Now you've got 2 airplanes that are probably about 15 years old now, and they're not even ready to, you're going to put an interior, a very expensive interior, into an airplane that's now about 15 years old.
And a lot of electronics.
And then, now you've got an airplane that's barely supportable.
Yeah.
T7. It's an interesting. Yeah, it's as much as people love to blame the OEMs, they go, wait a minute. The customer, you got a very schizophrenic customer.
Well, yeah, and remember, all this contracting was done prior to the rear up in inflation that we saw after the pandemic, right? And so Boeing has it in spades, but I talk to every defense contractor, and they'll all tell me the same thing. The fixed price deals we cut prior to the pandemic are hurting us because we didn't factor in these increased cost of labor. We didn't factor in increased cost of materials. We didn't factor in problems in our supply chain because they have the same problems too, right?
Yeah.
And so every one of them are like, look, we signed the next fixed price contract. DoD's helping us make up for the last problem. And, so I think they're getting the increases plus a little as DoD, because DoD needs to maintain their supply chains as well and their contractors as well. And so Boeing they're not the only ones that got hurt here. They got hurt in a big way. And I think they got,
everybody's getting crushed right now. It's just, it's not even, the raw material, the labor, everybody's got a headache. And there's not enough aspirin to go around. So it's just bad. It's interesting. Let's shift gears a little bit. We're talking about aero engines.
Sure.
Aero Engines Conference. Okay, LEAP and GTF are, it's an oligopoly there.
It is.
And then you got lease rates on CFM 56-5s and -7s are through the roof right now.
Yep.
FTI's, they've become a very versatile company with their quick turn engine center, the Lockheed Martin partnership, and they're what's the aero engine industry look like now? And then obviously LEAP has got LEAP's got a little bit of technical trouble, and GTF are well-known technical trouble.
Yeah,
that's got to be a headache as well.
The very interesting times are going to be in aerospace. So as much as Geared Turbofan has gotten the spotlight and problems, we actually, GE Aerospace is about to be launched on April 2nd. It'll be a standalone company. So they're starting to give a lot more detail on their business, a world-class engine business, right? World leaders in wide body, world leaders in narrow body through the CFM partnership. And, I was talking to one of their head engineers at the investor day. And for example, we were just talking about they're having problems with blades inside the LEAP engine as well, right? So Geared Turbofan, not the only folks having a problem, but they're having the problem even bigger than GE. But GE will tell you, look, people using our engine in hot and harsh environments, we've seen the blades come off these engines early. They're deformed. It's because people are working them really hard. But I think to even step back from that, one of the things I think we're learning broadly about this business is something that our mom probably and her dad probably told us when we grew up, but we forget it every so often in the business world, and that is you can't get something for nothing. And so both these engines, LEAP, Geared Turbofan, going to give us better fuel efficiency, but they're going to be maintenance hogs compared to the last generation of engines. They may not be on wing as long. They may cost more to maintain over their lifetime. And like you said, the folks at FTI and other MROs and solutions providers, they're probably going to get a better tailwind out of the last generation engines than we all thought, right? Because we'll see more of those flying for longer, so that airlines can keep lift while these new engines go through their teething problems. And the new engines are great. We have to go down the road of improving fuel burn in the industry. It's the right thing to do, from a greenhouse gas. But even we analyze the airlines too. You look at the amount of costs in an airline that is in fuel, and every airline in the world is going to chase better fuel efficiency, but it's not free, right? And we know that LEAP core is burning hotter than it did on the CFM, and it's challenging to burn things hotter and not have more problems. But it seems like GE has done pretty well on the stability of the LEAP. They've done, I think, a better job in getting spare engines out into the marketplace to support their airline customers, and that's why I think right now the LEAP has done better than the geared turbofan. Right, the geared turbofan has less moving parts. We were all worried about the gear. That's a one moving part that it's got that the LEAP doesn't have. But the inner core has more stages inside the LEAP than it has in the geared turbofan. So we would have thought the geared turbofan could have been the better technology, and we don't know over the long run. Maybe it will be, but the teething pains on it have just been much larger. Again, what I hear is the spare engine support in the marketplace hasn't been as good as on LEAP, and so right now I'd say, on the new engine, the latest generation of engines, it looks like the CFM LEAP is a bit of a winner. They're taking more market share. They're more stable. I think airline customers are happier. Where that geared turbofan, I think, is, we got this inspection program going on. It's knocking a bunch of airplanes.
Oh yeah. Well, look, this is the world around you. When you push technology, we've pushed technology, jet engine technology, as far as it can be pushed unless you start to change materials, ceramics or whatever else. And like you said, burning an engine hotter, it's a physics thing.
Yep.
It's physics. Larry Culp has done an amazing job. Look, 3 years ago, when I recruited Banacano out of GE and sent him to be the CEO of GS Precision, I think GE stock was at $5.50. And Matt's like, look, it's going to turn around, but it's interesting. But Culp's done a great job with it, and credit to Jack Welch. He built a culture of performance and excellence.
Yep.
And that still exists in the aero business, and it's kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, I think he bolted a lot of things on there, and it got hard to track all the things going on in GE. And as an analyst, it always makes things difficult. Right? You have these big conglomerates, and you've got financial services inside there, and all these other things. But like you said, at the core is a manufacturing business, a really world-class engine manufacturing business. And that's one of the funny things too, is so they're going to hive off Vernova. We're at the tail end of this divestiture program that Culp has gone through. They're going to hive off the Vernova power business. And we were looking at the other day, because we're thinking about what's the value of this thing now, and how to think about it as it rolls into a pure play. And Vernova, the power business, brings no profit, no operating profit to the business right now. And I was actually a bit surprised. I guess I live in aerospace too much, because I thought, so you're going to build a power plant and you're not going to make any money on it, because there's a heck of a lot of competition inside that space, right? But that's what reminds you about the beauty of the engine business. There's a limited number of people around the world that have been doing this business. Most have been doing it for about 100 years, since World War II-ish, right? Mm-hmm. It's Rolls, it's GE, it's Raytheon's Pratt and Whitney, MTU in Germany does this, Safran does this, but it's so limited. It's such a small, because there's magic inside those engines. Like you said, there's materials technology inside there. There's airflow technology inside there that's really hard to break into. And so that was at the core of some of that manufacturing GE made. some of those businesses, again, power business, it just, got over time, more and more people showed up. But Larry, funny, I found it interesting that Larry focused down to the GE Aerospace business, and that's where he went. It tells you when he looks at the long-term opportunities on the portfolio of GE businesses, he said, I want to be in the jet engine business. I think because it's just another indicator of what a great business that is, how hard it is to break into. I think it's the highest technology on any airliner.
You look at Boeing has said, they've come out and they said, we're not going to build another airliner for 10 years.
Yeah.
Airbus has kind of said the same thing. My shoulder shrug is, you're not going to build a new airliner unless you have a new engine to go with it. You're already burning what you got hot enough, probably about as hot as you can. You might be able to get a few thousand more pounds of thrust out of a LEAP or a GTF, not a whole lot. So what is the next, when you start talking about like a middle market aircraft, another 757 replacement or something like that, hey, look, there's no sense in building a revolutionary airplane unless you got a revolutionary engine to go with it. And nobody's got the cash to develop that. There's just no, Rolls-Royce ain't going to do it.
But GE's working the inducted fan. They do have cash, and they're working an inducted. They claim to us the inducted fan is going to be their next engine in 2035. That's what they claim. But so I will say too, I think that Boeing's comments on a new airplane are a ruse. Either a ruse or they haven't woken up yet. But I think they're about to wake up, because I think Boeing needs a new airplane. I think that, so when we talk to people in the business, I've talked to some of the engineers at MTU, because at Bloomberg Intelligence, I'm lucky enough to cover this in a global perspective. It's one of the things I really enjoy as I get to compare, sort of all sides of this industry, an industry, heavily weighted to Western Europe and the US. When we talk to folks at MTU, we say, next engines, because Pratt is talking to 2035 introduction for a new engine too. Next engines, what are we talking here? How are we going to build efficiencies? And what the MTU engineer said to us is, we see bigger fan sizes again. So the core, maybe stays the same size, maybe gets even a little smaller. The fan size, the bypass ratios keep increasing as they improve the efficiency of that core. And so if we're going to larger fan size, we knew the 737 couldn't take the last one, and that's why they pushed the engines forward, right? And they introduced that MCAS system, which was to stabilize the airplane, right? I think they're almost done with their ability to push, pull, and prod that airframe into what they want it to do. I would argue that maybe the time is right now for Boeing to think about a new airplane, because Calhoun he needs to sort of re-energize his business. He's got a backlog that is lower than Airbus's. The risk you always have when you introduce a new airplane is that you lose some of your backlog as people go, we don't want the old one. We want to get back in the queue for the new one. Boeing has less risk of that now because they've already had a backlog that's dwindled. Mm-hmm. If they could get out in front with a well-engineered product that were better than the 320. I know pilots that fly the 320 and they say, the emergency systems inside the 320, the alerting systems, far better than the 737. 737 is archaic, right? 737 has a problem with the de-icing on the engine inlets. That's not good. Has a problem with the geometry on the wings. He ought to get out in front and build a new one, because he's going to need it, because he needs to get those wings up so he could take bigger fan sizes. I don't know how the inducted fan fits in there. I'm a financial analyst. I don't understand. But my guess is that more ground clearance gives you something there too. Yeah. And I think he wants to train his next generation of engineers on how to introduce airplanes. And I think he wants to rethink his manufacturing process. And with a new airplane, maybe they could do an even heavier relook at the manufacturing process and the supply chain and think about how to optimize it for oversight, for training, for durability. So I'd argue maybe time is right. I mean, we all like to spend money when we have it, right? Right. But sometimes you got to go. Look, I'm no advocate of credit cards, but sometimes you got to go, hey, I just need 4 tires on the car, and the bank account's a little bit low, I'm just going to buy them because the right thing to do here is to fix the big issue, right? The time to fix the roof is when it's not raining, kind of deal, right? Just get it done.
Yeah, and look, he can get credit. He's got access to credit. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to pay for that. So it's out there. It'll be fun to watch. So yeah,
agreed.
Yeah, last triangle of the industry. Let's talk airframe MRO. Nobody's making AAR. Their stock, I think when I looked at stock today, it was up to $65. Wish I bought it at $9 when it was COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. John's done a nice job with AAR.
Yep.
But it's very hard to make money in airframe MRO in the United States. And most of the wide body stuff is in China or Asia.
Yep.
Or somewhere else.
Lower cost. A lot of times that stuff moves to lower cost locations. Labor is always an issue. Right now, though, I think almost all MRO is so in demand that I think you could probably do. You may not make the profit margins, but you probably do okay no matter where you are because there's such a clamoring for maintenance. I think in every part of the airplane. But I think in time, this too will fade, right? And in time, we'll go back to the pre. I don't know the post pandemic trend of extreme maintenance activity. And when that happens, you'll want to be in a lower cost locale for all that stuff.
But does that become a national issue? Does that bother? I mean, does that bother you as a national issue?
I mean, look, I think that we want to have these capabilities inside the country, yes, all the time, right? So we don't want to cede it away to overseas. So I think it does. I know the FAA has had some reports out on outsourcing. They're concerned about it. They'll probably spend a little more time analyzing it and making sure they can warrant that things are being done correctly. Maybe warrant's a strong word, but at least oversee it and feel good about the fact that this maintenance work is being done correctly. But I suspect though it's going to be a hard trend to buck. Well, again, once the demand diminishes a little bit, it's going to be a hard trend to buck because airlines in the airline business, you're always looking for the cheapest way to do everything so you can deliver seats at the lowest cost. Airframe a little bit less critical. I'm not going to say it's not critical, but less critical than engine side. And so I think it'd be a hard trend to buck, like I said, once the big demand in maintenance is subsided.
Yeah, I was talking to Richard Burrs, a senator from North Carolina. I was talking to his staff a couple of years ago, and I was like, "There's no wide body maintenance in the United States," and they were floored. I mean, they're like, "What do you mean? Nobody can make any money on it, so it's all going to China." I mean, the Chinese are literally paying fuel for pay your fuel, bring your airplane to us, we'll pay for the fuel to get it here, we'll fix it, and we'll send it back, and it'll still be cheaper than a D-check in Tulsa. And that's a little bit of a scary adventure. We'll see how all that plays out. It may not be an option for years, but
and I'm sure we do the defense stuff in country. I'm sure, right? I just don't know exactly where. But I think I'm sorry.
Yeah, you got your depots at Cherry Point. Yeah. Tinker or whatever, but it's just the commercial side of the house. It's a little bit scary.
But these are skills you want to maintain inside the country, right? And so again, I think it's something we have to think about long term. I think we're an aerospace nation, right? So one of the beauties I think of the country is, I think we have the most airports of any country in the world. And if you think about where aerospace has sort of grown up and flourished, it's here. If you think about the biz jet world, it's probably the highest level of use of private, biz jets and single engine aircraft in the world. We've seen investment in even those from outside the country. But I think it's one of those core industries that we want to protect here in the U.S. Right? I think it's one that's not going away. Right? Mm-hmm. There's magic to it. Right? Everybody wants to be in the business, but there's magic to it. Right? You and I can go to sleep on the East Coast of the U.S. As we board an airliner departing across the Atlantic, wake up in Paris, wake up in London, right? There's the ability to connect the world, it's a wonderful thing. And again, people demand usually more and more of it the more money they make. So it's a great industry. It's highly skilled. Labor gets paid well. The tolerances are tight, so it keeps your manufacturing industry on its toes. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's all, and the maintenance is the same way. It's all stuff we want to protect and I think promote inside this country. I think we've let a bunch of it slip away, right? And I think we do need to get these senators, staffs, and everybody up on the fact that we can't just let these skill sets slip away. I go through Delta Tech Ops. I've had a chance to walk through there a couple of times. You look at the average age in Delta Tech Ops, and their bunch, nothing against gray hair, but they're a bunch of gray-haired guys running around there, maintaining engines. There's skill sets that are going away in this industry. We got to make sure they stay. We pull people in the industry. We got to make sure we do it here. We want to do it in the U.S. because it's a good long-term industry to be involved in.
You're pretty bullish. It sounds like overall you're pretty bullish on aerospace right now.
I love aerospace. I love aviation. I think it's a magic industry. We're having problems right now. Airbus isn't. Airbus, I think, is doing quite a nice job of coming up the curve of post-pandemic ramp. I think they've cultivated their supply chain better, cultivated their workers better. I think we need to learn a little bit from that. American capitalism can get a little bit crazy. I'm not anti-capitalist. I love a stock that performs well and gives me a dividend and blah blah blah. But you got to do things for the long-term health, and I think the U.S. will be back to that. But we have to foster it, right? It's not, you can't just keep cutting back the plant and not giving it any chance to grow and watering it, and giving it any fertilizer, right? And so we'll be back, and we need to be back because I think it's a great industry, something we definitely want to foster.
And look, I just look at everybody, what Airbus has done, with their line of A321s, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, Boeing will get it'll get its situation fixed. 787 is still a great. I got on a 787 in LA. And I was shocked that I looked up and looked up at the monitor, at 41,000 feet. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
It's a nice flying airplane, 41,000 feet. It's fun to watch the industry. You can't, Russian titanium is going to be at a premium right now. It's going to be a premium. High strength steel is going to be a premium. But maybe that creates a super cycle for a lot of the environment. The industry as well, too, economically.
You look around the world, everybody wants to be in this business, right? Embraer, national champion in Brazil, build smaller airplanes, love the aerospace business. Bombardier in Canada, Japanese heavies build componentry for airplanes. Koreans build componentry. The Chinese want to be in the business. The Comac C919. Airbus, right, wasn't around decades ago, and now different pieces get coupled together. Now they're a large player in the business. It's a great business, and everyone around the world knows it, and they want to get in it, right? And so, because of its high value add, because of what it does, again, for your manufacturing muscle, and so we need to protect it. It's a great industry, and the things we do, like you said, 787, all composite. Stick it in an oven and cook it for a couple hours, and boom, you got yourself a tube. It's good stuff, right? It's good stuff.
It's pretty amazing technique. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. And the whole where we are today, and where tomorrow, the eVTOLs. I'm not sure where we are with eVTOLs yet, but they're there and they're coming. The hypersonics. You think about SpaceX and Starlink. You look at the BizJet guys. I look at I was talking to a Gulfstream person today, and talking about the G700. The biggest challenge with the G700 is where are you going to put it? It's such a big airplane, but it's a cool good. But who would have thought that a couple thousand ultra long range cabins, would be out there flying right now between Bombardier, Gulfstream, and now Falcon Jet. A couple thousand of those things are out there flying. Nobody would have thought it.
You look at Gulfstream's margins over the last bunch of years, and it shows it shows how in demand the ability to fly long distances on a biz jet, and a comfortable biz jet, what it's worth to a company. That's a great product. Bombardier's done a nice job of going up the curve. Falcon, I'm sure, will do an outstanding job on theirs as well. But just the different sides of aviation. It's all, it's fun to see all those different little parts. All the great products they build.
It must be.
Go ahead, sorry.
It must be fun from the analyst point of view.
Well, we always get a kick out of looking at the numbers, right? So, and that's, I think, one of the interesting things about eVTOLs, we're trying to figure out the numbers on that. So, as an analyst, I think it's, the products are always cool and whiz bang, and you get excited about them. And then you'll have to go take it back home and you go like, okay, so what are the profit margins on this business, right? Which gives you a good sense for what the real demand is for some of these products. And the company's ability to produce at those, produce and provide at those prices. And eVTOL is the one I keep looking at. I'm trying to figure out, like, I'd love to get whisked from, I don't know, World Trade out to Newark Airport in 15 minutes so I could jump on my flight to Paris. And for, I don't know, $50 or $100, I don't know what I'm going to have to pay, right? And so, but I feel like it's a product that's coming. I don't know that it's coming in the timeline that I'm hearing from the companies, because I feel like there's so much work to be done on deconflicting airspace, right? So my eVTOL flies over Newark Airport. How do we manage departures and arrivals and our little quadcopter flying through there? So I feel like that deconflicting airspace is challenging. Are we going to stick a pilot in this now and have one seat for a pilot? What does that do to the economics? Because we only have 3 paying passengers now, going to pay that pilot a bunch of money, or is it go pilot less? Yeah. And then what is everybody willing to pay? What are you and I willing to pay to get whisked around? So again, it's coming. I mean, we do have vertical lift right now. It's called a helicopter. I think those are. Yeah,
well, that's how I look. I go, what are you guys doing that I can't do it in an R66 or an R44?
You got it.
Yeah, that's the technology's cool, but if I took a simple Robinson R44 and said, I'll take 2 passengers back and forth from Newark Airport to the, downtown helipad.
Yep.
That works too. So, and doesn't use that much fuel, and $800,000 it's $800,000 for the helicopter. So guys, there's your competition right there.
That's all right.
So I don't know. Jury's still out on that.
The problem is getting that pilot out of that seat, right? Because that's the problem. The Robinson needs a pilot or any helicopter. So the problem is getting the pilot out of that seat and it's the story of what we're doing at Aviation actually every single day. And it's how do we bring the price point down so we can bring consumption up, right? Mm-hmm. The more we lower the price point of that, you name it, that seat to Europe, that seat to, domestic seat, the more we lower price points, the more we build demand. And the more we build demand, the higher volume we can build out, the more we can drop the price of the product. And, it's got that sort of virtuous cycle to it. And that's where the eVTOL guys are. They got to find a way to push costs down to make it affordable to everybody, so that your mom and my mom are saying, hey, we're downtown. Let's just take the eVTOL out to the suburbs and, and fly away.
Yeah. Yeah. We remember when we did this on our R44. So, hey, look, let's, why don't we wrap it up there and do it again down the road?
Yes. I enjoyed it. I'd love to do it again. So, always ready.
George, love Bloomberg, live what you write every day. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an honor to have you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it too. Thank you. I enjoyed being on. Thank you.
And enjoy the fishing trip next week with your son.
I will. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at NorthstarESG.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Piven.